All right, so get ready, because today we're diving into a topic that's both incredibly important and deeply unsettling. We're going
Yeah.
to be looking at this YouTube video, and it's titled, "The Hidden Genocide, How America Erased Its First People."
Wow.
Now,
Just the title.
just that title alone raises some serious questions. I
Yeah.
mean, is this hyperbole, or is there a hidden truth kind of waiting to be uncovered?
Right.
So that's what we're here to figure out.
Yeah, and what's fascinating to me is how this video connects this whole historical question to like what's happening right now politically.
Oh, interesting.
You know, like if you think back to former President Trump and all those statements he made on Native American citizenship,
Yeah.
those weren't just words.
Right.
You know, they had the potential to really impact Indigenous communities.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah.
It really adds this whole other layer of complexity
Uh-uh.
that we can't just ignore.
We can't.
And, given how sensitive this topic is, I want to assure you that we're approaching this with the utmost respect and objectivity.
Of course.
We're simply here to unpack the information in this video and kind of see what we can learn from it.
For sure. And I think a good place to start is with the video's core argument.
Okay?
And that is that the U.S. is built on land taken from Indigenous people.
Right.
And their oppression continues in a lot of different forms.
Okay.
And often it's hidden from plain sight.
Wow.
That's the hidden genocide the title is talking about.
So, like, right off the bat, the video hits us with this really stark statistic.
Yeah.
It says that Native Americans today only make up 2% of the U.S. population,
Wow.
which is about 6.8 million people.
Huh.
Now, if we just take that number and think about how huge this country is,
Yeah, it puts things in perspective.
it really does.
You know, that 6.8 million isn't just individuals.
Right.
It represents centuries of history.
Oh, wow.
Languages and cultures
Yeah.
that have been systematically pushed to the margins.
It's
Yeah,
kind of heavy to think about.
it is.
And, this is where the video goes into some really dark territory.
Yeah.
The boarding schools,
Right.
the ones that were designed to assimilate Indigenous children
Yeah,
by, like, forcibly removing them from their families
yes,
and stripping them of their heritage.
absolutely.
And the conditions in some of these schools were just truly horrific.
It's,
And the trauma that inflicted continues to affect generations.
absolutely. It's a chilling reminder of how far assimilation policies have gone
Wow.
and the devastating impact they have.
Yeah.
And this isn't ancient history.
Right?
This is something that's still felt deeply within these communities today.
Yeah. The video does mention that President Biden issued a formal apology
Right.
for the boarding school atrocities.
Yeah.
But
The question
is an apology enough?
is it enough?
Okay.
An apology is significant, but it can't erase what happened.
Right.
What matters is what concrete actions come after the apology.
Right.
What's being done to actually help these communities that are facing challenges today.
Yeah. And the video does not shy away from those challenges.
No, it doesn't.
It really paints a pretty bleak picture of what's happening now,
Yeah.
like highlighting the fact that poverty, unemployment, and suicide are so disproportionately high among Native Americans.
Yeah. And, you can't just look at those as isolated problems.
Right.
They're all intertwined
Yeah.
with this historical context that we're talking about.
Right.
Generations of dispossession and discrimination and limited access to resources and opportunities.
Yeah.
All of those things contribute to these disparities that we see today.
It's almost like a cycle that's just so hard to break free from.
Absolutely.
And then the video brings up this really stark contrast.
Yeah.
The U.S. spends billions and billions of dollars on foreign wars,
Uh-huh.
but the resources that go to its own indigenous population are so tiny in comparison.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
It makes you think about where our priorities really lie.
Yeah, and this is where they bring up this concept that I think is really helpful to explain all this.
Okay.
Internal colonialism.
Yeah, I think that's a great concept to unpack.
Okay, so break it down for us.
So think about the power dynamics that we typically see between a country that's colonizing and the people they're colonizing.
Oh.
Now, apply that same framework within just one country,
Okay.
in this case, between the U.S. government and Native American populations.
So essentially it's saying that the U.S. government has historically treated Native Americans as a colonized population within its own borders.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that helps to explain, the constant fight for resources and recognition and basic rights
Wow.
that we see today.
Yeah.
It's one way to understand the injustices that have been happening for generations.
That's actually a really helpful way to look at it.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it like that before.
Yeah. And that's just one part of this.
Right.
This video goes into so much more.
Yeah.
from specific historical events to current political debates.
Well, I'm definitely hooked. Let's keep
It's,
going.
yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so one thing that really struck me from the first part was this quote, and it says, "The truth is uncomfortable, but it must be told.
Right.
America's indigenous peoples are still being oppressed while the world looks away."
Wow.
So it's a powerful statement.
It is.
And it kind of makes you wonder, like, what does this oppression look like in the 21st century?
Right, because the video doesn't just focus on the past.
Right.
It shines a light on the problems that are still happening today
Right.
in these communities.
Yeah.
You know, the shockingly high rates of poverty, unemployment, even suicide.
Yeah.
These aren't just numbers, you know, these
Yeah.
are real people, real families who are
Yeah.
struggling.
The video paints a particularly bleak picture of life on a lot of these reservations.
Yeah.
You know, where poverty, addiction, and just like this sense of despair is everywhere.
Yeah.
So is this just a consequence of everything that's happened in the past?
Well, it's not simple.
Right.
You know, the trauma, the loss of land and resources,
Yeah.
ongoing discrimination.
Right.
They all play a big role. But we also have to remember that Native American communities are diverse.
Right.
And they don't all have the same experiences.
Yeah.
But what we can say is that those injustices from the past definitely contribute to what we see today.
Yeah. One of the most striking things that the video talks about
Yeah.
is the lack of basic necessities in a lot of these communities, like clean water, quality education, adequate health care.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is. I mean, in this day and age,
Yeah.
it's almost unthinkable.
It is, and yet it's a reality for so many people.
Right.
And it's all connected to the lack of funding and
Yeah.
neglect that these communities have faced for generations.
It really makes you think, like,
Yeah.
we're talking about two different Americas existing at the same time.
Right.
And they kind of go on to talk about that,
Yeah.
you know, bringing up the billions spent on wars overseas compared to the resources that go to indigenous communities here at home.
Yeah, it really makes you question where our priorities are.
Yeah.
You know, the video isn't picking a side politically.
Right. But it definitely wants us to think critically about, you know,
Yeah.
where our money's going
Yeah.
and who's benefiting.
And speaking of politics,
Yeah.
the video spends a lot of time talking about Trump.
Yes.
Specifically what he did and said about Native Americans.
Yeah, like when he mocked Elizabeth Warren
Yeah.
for saying she had Native American ancestry.
Yeah. And that whole incident with the Navajo veterans under Andrew Jackson's portrait.
Yeah, the video argues that those moments show a deeper disrespect
Right.
for indigenous history and culture.
Right.
I mean, think about it. You have these Navajo veterans
Right.
who served our country
Right.
standing under a portrait of the president
Right.
who forced thousands of Native Americans off their land
Right.
on the Trail of Tears.
Yeah, it's jarring.
Yeah, it
To
is.
the least.
It makes you wonder, was that intentional or was it just a mistake?
Right. Either way.
Either way, what kind of message does that send?
Exactly.
Right.
You know, whether he meant to or not.
Right.
It has an impact. And it can't be ignored.
Yeah, you know, it reinforces those harmful stereotypes
Mm-hmm.
and contributes to erasing Native American voices and experiences.
Absolutely.
And then they go back to something they talked about earlier,
What's that?
Trump's idea to get rid of birthright citizenship.
Right.
And they argue that that could be really bad for indigenous communities.
Yeah, because a lot of births happen in places without proper documentation.
Right.
And that's where it gets kind of tricky legally,
Okay.
because this idea goes against existing treaties and the whole concept of tribal sovereignty.
Wow.
And the fact that 22 states sued over it
Yeah.
shows just how controversial it is.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't just a theoretical debate.
Right.
This actually affects people's lives.
So even though Trump's not president anymore,
Yeah,
these issues are still important today.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what any president does or says can have a long-term impact,
Right.
especially on marginalized communities.
Right.
We have to remember that these problems go way beyond just one president. They're deeply embedded in our country's history.
Yeah.
And they still affect us today.
Yeah, the video goes on to give some examples of how the government puts money and business ahead of Native American rights and concerns,
Mm-hmm.
like building pipelines through sacred sites
Yeah.
and allowing oil drilling in national parks.
Right. And all of that connects back to the fight for land rights
Right.
and environmental justice that,
Yeah.
that these communities are facing.
Yeah.
It shows the tension between making money
Right.
and preserving indigenous cultures and land.
It's like a modern version of that dispossession we were talking about before.
It is. It's a continuation of that fight to control their ancestral lands and resources.
Yeah, and it's been going on for centuries.
It has.
They bring up the Dakota Access Pipeline protests
Right.
as a powerful example of this.
Yeah, that was a turning point.
Yeah.
It got the whole world's attention.
Yeah.
And it showed how determined they are to protect their land and water.
And how did the government react to that?
Well, the video shows that they were pretty harsh.
Yeah.
Rubber bullets, tear gas, mass arrests.
Wow.
A lot of people saw that as an overreaction
Right.
to peaceful protests.
Wow. It really shows you the power imbalance.
Yeah, it does. It makes you wonder how far they'll go
Yeah.
to protect those economic interests,
Yeah.
even if it hurts their own citizens.
This has been a lot to process.
Yeah.
You know, the video really shows how tough things are for Native Americans today.
Right. But there is a glimmer of hope.
Okay.
The video talks about their resilience
Yeah.
and strength.
Right.
It shows how they're still fighting
Right.
for their rights, their land, their future.
So even with all of this,
Yeah.
they haven't given up.
Not at all.
Wow.
The video ends with a powerful call to action.
Yeah.
It wants us to listen and understand and do something.
Right.
It asks, the story is not yet finished,
Yeah.
but who will write the next chapter?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
It is, and I think we need to take it seriously. You know, if we want this story to have a different ending,
Yeah.
it's going to take all of us.
Yeah, it will.
So what can we actually do?
Yeah, what does it mean to be an ally in this fight?
Yeah, and thankfully, that's what the video talks about in the last section.
Okay, good.
I'm really interested to see what they have to say.
Me too. Let's get into that in part 3.
All right, so we're back for the last part of our deep dive
Yeah.
into this video about the hidden genocide of Native Americans.
Right.
We've talked about a lot,
We have.
you know, the history and the challenges that these communities face today.
Uh-huh.
But now I want to talk about what we can actually do
Yeah,
with all this knowledge.
because knowing isn't enough.
Right, like the video says, awareness without action is meaningless.
Right. It doesn't just leave us feeling sad.
Yeah.
It ends by challenging us to do something about it.
Yeah, it asks, will we stay quiet
Right.
or will we finally listen, understand, and act?
Those words really hit me hard.
Me too. It's like they're talking right to us. And we have to take it seriously.
We do.
So let's get into it. What does it actually mean
Yeah.
to be an ally to Native American communities?
Right. How can we help make things better?
Yeah, and the video says it starts with education.
Okay.
We need to go beyond what we learned in school
Right.
and find more accurate information.
Yeah, we have to seek out the truth.
Right. And there's so much out there.
There is.
Books, articles, documentaries, podcasts.
All made by Indigenous people sharing their own stories.
Yeah. And we shouldn't underestimate how powerful it is to learn directly from those communities.
Yeah.
Go to cultural events, visit museums and historical sites,
Uh-huh.
and talk to Indigenous people.
Right. Always be respectful.
Yeah. It's about recognizing that learning is a never-ending process.
Absolutely.
We should always be open to learning more and challenging our own biases.
And as we learn, we also need to speak up.
Yeah.
Use our platforms to share their stories.
Right. Share articles on social media.
Yeah.
Talk to friends and family about this.
Yeah.
Even write to our elected officials.
Right. Advocate for policies that support these communities.
Exactly. Use whatever influence we have to make sure Native American voices are heard.
Yeah, and challenge those systems that have kept them quiet for so long.
It's not just about talking, though.
Right.
It's also about listening.
We need to hear what they're saying
Yeah.
about what they need and what's important to them.
And support their right to make their own decisions.
Yes. Respect their sovereignty.
Yeah.
Their right to govern themselves.
You know, there are so many amazing organizations out there
There are.
led by Native Americans
Uh-huh.
working to make things better. Yeah, we can donate or volunteer our time.
And don't forget about Indigenous businesses and artists.
Oh, yeah.
You know, buy from Native-owned companies,
Uh-huh.
showcase their art and culture.
Yeah.
Those are real ways to help them thrive.
It all comes down to doing something,
Right?
whether it's big or small,
Big or small.
and realizing that we all have a role to play in making the world a fairer place.
It's about taking action.
Yeah.
Moving from awareness to actually doing something.
Right.
From education to engagement.
From just feeling bad
Yeah,
to being an active ally.
that's it.
This deep dive has really changed my perspective.
Yeah.
It's made me see that this isn't just about helping Native Americans. It's about recognizing their rights,
Yes.
their strength,
Yeah.
and how important they are to this country.
And realizing that their story is still being written. Like the
Right.
video says, who will write the next chapter?
That's such a powerful question.
It is.
And I think we all have the answer.
Right.
It's up to us.
It is?
Are we going to be the generation that continues to erase them and treat them unfairly?
Right.
Or are we going to be the generation that finally listens, learns, and acts
Yeah.
to create a better future for everyone?
I hope it's the second one.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation.
It has.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to everyone listening. I hope this has been as thought-provoking for you as it has been for us.
I hope so.
Remember, we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
We do.
So let's choose to be on the right side of history.